Hi everyone. I want to talk about something that we all want to ignore, which is living too long. Do you imagine that we may be the first generation that might live to 100? Are we grappling with that statement? There's a day in the actuarial, our national body and also our international body asked us, you actuaries, you're pricing annuities, but what if somebody lives for 250 years? All right? And no, it was a hard question, by the way. But us as actuaries, we call it longevity risk. We don't really say what it is, right? There's a big issue that we need to think about, and one of the key areas we have to consider is the cost of living long is not just about your rent. It's not about your as men, maybe we need our wives to be with us, but it's also about our healthcare. So cost of healthcare is quite expensive. So I will want to start off the slides with one. I'll do a small background, then I'll talk about health inflation. We ignore this part because it's boring, and then why save and how it works and way forward. So background. So let me start. When Kenya got independence, do you know the life expectancy at that time was 48 years old? Yeah, I can Google it. Life expectancy in 1963 in Kenya was 48 years. So if you tell somebody, buy a pension, they're like, what is that? And today, what's life expectancy? So this graph here, the pinkish lines are in the 60s, and the greenish lines are in the 70s, right? So even as a continent, our life expectancy has not gone to the 80s. And do you know what that means? So it's not in our brains. We don't have an 80-year-old working. So we are not able to relate to that. But our generation might be the first ones. And the problem, what's the problem when you're the first one? You take the brunt, right? So if somebody living in Japan today, if the average life expectancy is 85, they're used to seeing, remember, let me give you the definition of life expectancy. What they do is they say, on average, when a child is born, on average, how long will they live? There's a child who will die at 18 years, drive, fancy car, get a big car and have an accident and die. There's somebody who will die at 90, but what's the average, right? So it means that when you see 85, it means, yes, there are people who die before 85 and people who die after 85. So Kenya, there are people who will die before 65 and guys will die after 65, but the average is 65. So what that means is that our generation doesn't have a lot of old people who are roaming around and living. So we are not cognizant of that risk. We are not aware of it. We think we do, but we are not aware of it. Nigeria is at 56, and I don't know if APA plans to open shop in Nigeria, but I can tell you, selling pensions there will be hard because, if people are like, okay, yeah, yeah, I get my benefits after 60, but the average expectancy is at 56. So the first part you have to think about is the continent you are in, and the fact that some of these products we're talking about are in other markets and not in our markets just because of the nature of our market. So the second part, I also want to touch on what John said. When you retire, remember you're putting cash in a pot, you're putting cash in your account, and then you hope that you will live off that pot of money, right? So that's what we call income replacement ratio. So we've modeled for you, if you started saving at age 24, at age 30, up to age 50, and you decided that you'd be taking a percentage of your salary, in this case we've said 12% of your cash, how much of that pot of money will be enough for you when you retire? So how many people here started contributing at 50? Or you guys are great. You start contributing at 20. Eric, you start contributing at 24. Right? So if you contribute at 24 years, 12% of your salary, and your salary is growing at 7%, and APA is giving you 10% return, only then will you get that so-called 80% ratio. Do you know that? Imagine. So this thing of if your final salary at 59 is 100K and you want 80K from your pot of cash and you assume it will come, it won't come. So RBA did a survey and said, where is Kenya today? And what's the number? 34%. So if you look at that table, what does that mean on average we are saving at what age? Yeah, that's the reality, guys. So if you start saving at 40, 12% of your cash, it means that just expect your money at retirement to be 35. Now, remember, I'm still setting the scene. We've not gone to PRMF yet. I'm still setting the scene to tell you, what does that tell you when you see 34%? Okay? Yeah? It means that you'll not have enough money for your life, right? So that means you maybe need to get a job, right? But do you know something about your cost of insurance? What does it do? Or does it go down to 34%? Or it goes, So, and are you going to save for that? You know what? Most of us will depend on our kids to support us. There's a guy whose dad was asking them, he wants to sell the house so that he can pay his medical bill. And they said no. Imagine, it's your money. Just die. Yeah. Right? Right? Oh, so you think you own Windsor Hotel, right? You own this hotel. You've gone to the US. The bill is 80 million, and you want to sell the hotel. Do you think they'll agree? No, yeah? It's under your name, eh? Okay, it's coming. Okay? So I want us to appreciate something called health inflation. I think a lot of us don't appreciate it, and I always want us to where's this thing? I want us to appreciate this thing. So this is a newspaper article for Uchumi. Uchumi is dead, by the way. For Eric, I know you don't know what this is. This is our Carrefour. Dead. Okay? How much was for the, ladies really know prices of things. I go home, tell my wife, how much is there sugar? Do you know the price of sugar? So how much was sugar in 95? I know men you don't know. Yeah, so don't try and imply you knew. 70 bob then, sugar right now at 2 kgs, 300 bob. Right? It's not 300 bob, it's 305. The 5 bob counts. 305. How much was ugali 2 kg in 1995? It's 28 bob. Now it's 160. To the average person, that's a big jump. No, it's not. What's that inflation over that period? I've done the work for you. How much is it? Just 6%. Imagine. Somebody tells you inflation of 6, you're like, oh, that's a low inflation. But you see, if you see it in reality, this is what that looks like. That jump is what that looks like, right? What's the inflation for healthcare? 10% at least. We'll get there, but just know healthcare inflation is 10%. So if that's the price for sure, and how many years is that? 95 to today? 30 years? 30 years? So if you're 50 today and your price at 80, so when you go to the hospital, this will be the bills. But this is at 6%. So I have an example. So I really looked online can I get a 50-year inflation that looks at 10%? Yeah? And this is it. This is a 50-year. So this was somebody put a cash sale from Njugoni Rwadhi Hotel in 1970 for chai, meat, and ng'ombe, and they paid 25 cents. Yeah, they paid 0.25. They pay 25 cents, huh? And then I asked GPT, in the age of AI, I asked AI, now, give me an equivalent price for this, yeah? So the AI said, a cup of chai, a hotel of that style, establishment, kibanda, CBD, 40 bob. Okay? So, what is that inflation? 9.5. So that's very close to medical inflation. Okay? So 25 cents versus, not 25 but 25 cents, 0.025 cents. It's on the 25 cent side. And now today that tea is 40 bob, right? Now, what are you noticing? You're adding 2 zeros. Okay? 25 cents, if you add 2 zeros, you get 25 bob. It's not exactly 40 bob, but it gives you an order of magnitude. So add 2 zeros. So if you're 40 years old today, at 90, which most likely you will be the first generation to live to, the medical bills you're seeing, the health insurance quote you're seeing, you ask APA or any insurer for a quote for healthcare, and they tell you it's 100K, you should add. So if it's 100K, what will be your quote? What will be your quote? No, what will be your quote? Just don't be afraid. Just say it. Yeah? It will be how much? If you're 40 today and you add 50 years, 90, and an average quote for APA is 100K for that age group, which I don't even think you have that, the quote will be 10 million shillings. So every time you see it's 10 million, those are facts. That's 9.5% inflation. Those are facts, unfortunately. I know we don't want to accept it, but that's what that is, right? Now, I want you, every time you see a medical insurance quote from a company, I want you to remember this receipt. Because when you're 90, that's how this receipt will look like to you, right? So when you're 90, you'll be showing your children, this is how the quotes were when I was 40. It'll be this receipt, right? Now that you have set the scene, you need to understand the biggest thing you'll be fighting for healthcare will be inflation. Don't assume it's not a thing. It's a thing, and it's a big thing. So, I want to give an example for a 30-year-old, because that is where most of your clients will be, right? Who you can sell this discussion to. So, when a 30-year-old sees an 80-year-old quote, why did they choose 30? Because most insurers, the maximum cover they have today is 80, right? A lot of insurance companies are not going beyond 80. So I said, let's use 30 years old, and then let's say a 30-year-old in 50 years will be 80. So let's get just a normal retail quote. It's 100,000 bob. That quote is 10 million shillings. And the rule is just add 2 zeros. Now, health inflation in Kenya, and I am privileged to be the actuary for most of the large players, most of the actuary for SHA. So I look at nearly 80% of all the health revenue in this market, and that range is correct, 8 to 12%. So 10% is fair, right? So the only way you will fight this inflation is investment return. That's it. That's the only way you can fight it. And that means putting cash in a pot today to fight that inflation. So when you ask yourself, why am I investing in a PRMF fund, is you're sending soldiers to fight inflation. Because if you don't and you wait, you'll need 10 mil. 10 mil or just die. Those are your options, yeah? Yeah? Because if you don't have assets, what will happen? You have to sell them, right? When will you sell the family jewels? Or family plastics? Okay? So why sell for PRMF? But I always like these AI images. They really show, we've really come far, yeah? Imagine, just type, humans looking out, and then it just comes, It's so nice. Huh? You know, in the past, you had to get some guy to do an image, Imagine, we are in the future. We're in the future. So, why are you doing this? I remember you're just fighting inflation. So, I've given you 3 scenarios here. And thank you to the team that was doing the designs. I like that happy face for APA on there as a indentation, APA smiley face. Look at these 3 scenarios. Assume inflation is 10%, and then assume your return is, assume inflation is 8, or it's 10, or it's 12, okay? So remember, inflation can be 8% to 12, so I just gave you, assume those 3 scenarios, Then assume return is 10. Let's assume you just take a guaranteed scheme and you stay at 10. So your investments are not changing, it's just 10%. What actually you're doing is you are changing your inflation profile, because if your investments are here and inflation is here, you have a -2. So which means actually you have a negative inflation, because the money you're putting in is growing faster than the inflation in the country. So actually you have a negative inflation, okay? If your money is growing as fast as inflation, it means that you have no inflation cost. Because if you put money now, that 100K today, and it grows at the same space as inflation, you'll actually have the 10 mil when you're 80. So actually, you can still put the 100K today. If your investments are not growing as fast as inflation, you actually have a 2% inflation. You fought it, but you've not fought it enough, right? So this graph is just showing you those 2 worlds. No PRMF, the blue lines, which means you fight the inflation yourself, and you say, look, I'm not putting any cash aside, I'll figure it out. The red line is you have cash, and that cash is fighting inflation. Are you seeing the difference? Are you seeing the difference when you're 80? That's it. That is really the argument for having funds. That's really it, just having funds to fight inflation. And it's not intuitive until you realize that, that concept of money working for you kind of a thing. Think of this as money fighting inflation. So either at age 80, you say, I will get money from my pension scheme to pay for the healthcare, and we all know your money is at 35%, right? Or you try and be as close as possible to the rates that they are today. So you have 2 decisions. Either the people in the red, the quotes they are saying today are the quotes essentially they will be having in theory, right? Because their money will be equivalent, that 10 million is equivalent to what they have today. Or you can be the guy who decides, at 80, I will go get a job. Okay? Now remember longevity? Yeah? What if you live to 100? What happens? With that graph. Does that graph look like it's about to pierce the roof? Okay? Now, for the people who know Kenya government, for the first time, the government of Kenya agreed to give tax incentives for PRMF. And the government wants to tax you more. So even they saw those graphs and said, you know what? If you put any cash on a PRMF, we'll give you 15K tax support per month. So even so actually literally, you're leaving PAYE money on the table, right? Because you could have put that cash in a PRMF fund, and actually you'll argue for the tax advantage. RBI has been pushing to make it a pure tax relief. I know they'll get that, but right now it's still a deductible on your PAYE. Okay? And there are all these other things about retention. But I think for me, the biggest risk is reputational risk. Do we want to see the CEO of APA, Eric, wallowing at 90 Wallowing? Right? No, we don't. Yeah? I know a lot of people say, no, he was a former CEO. No, he's former CEO off. There's that off part. So either you make a decision to support your people, or there'll be former employees of your company. So it's high time, you've seen the risk, you've seen the danger, it's high time you manage that risk and danger, right? Or you send them to another country. Okay? Now, that was the money problem. Now let's talk about qua ground. In Kenya we say qua ground. There are other problems. Qua ground means there are other issues. Yeah? Today, even that money that the retiree wants to have, for example, a person today at 70 years old in 2030, so you just take the retail quotes for a medical insurer and you project inflation 2036. The quote cost is 420,000, right? And why I did that is I asked myself, at what point is the cost of medical more than the entire pension of somebody earning 35K? And that is at 70 years in 2036, right? So somebody retires 2026, 10 years from now, at 35K fixed. But then how many people sell increasing annuities? Okay? How many people buy increasing annuities? Huh? What percent of Kenyans buy increasing annuities? 10%. So 90% of Kenyans retire with 35K and it stays there until they die. And we sign that thing. Very good. Eh? Send your money here. If you know, yeah. So we're not selling increasing annuity to people, which means the annuity they buy stays at that level. So this average person who at 60 today, maybe has walked out of our offices today with 35K annuity, in 2036, that 35K will not even be able to buy them healthcare, just normal healthcare. What will happen? They'll go to their children, right? The Gen Zs. Okay? So what will happen? They'll cut down the benefit. And they'll cut it down, they'll do co-pays, eventually they'll go to SHA, right? But there's a bigger issue, my friends. And the bigger issue is this. If you don't create a scheme where you're many of you, if you're alone, and even if you have whatever amount of money you have, most insurance companies today don't take people above 85. Am I right? How many people have gone to take their aunt or uncle? They have the cash, it's there, but they're like, just give me a quote, and you're told no quote. Is that a reality? So if you don't have a scheme, I can give you an example. We have some retiree schemes where one guy is 96 and another guy is 60, but because they come as a group to the insurer treats them as a group and gives them a quote. But that 96-year-old, if they go to the insurer alone, there's no quote for them. Now, that is the power of a PRMF scheme. It's the hidden power because it now allows you to even get a risk pooling. Remember, insurance is just risk pooling. A risk pooling solution for yourself. So this is something that also I want you to also to think about. It's the affordability issue, but also the access issue. So, how it works. This is the grandfather coming with his new wife to see their son. Or that is a photograph, or that's a mirror of themselves in the future. So is this chick looking at that as herself or the husband's new wife? That's the power of AI, guys. Power of AI, guys. So, what's the foundation? There's a guideline, and if you're bored enough, you can read it or you can tell your AI to read it for you. But you have a guideline of 2018 that allows that setup, a segregated scheme. It allows you to do a PMF within your scheme. So all those 1,000 schemes can actually set up a PMF within themselves. You don't need to set up, you don't need new trustees, you don't need new administrators. Just the existing infrastructure today can run a PRMF program. As long as your money is less than 50 million, you can still use the same IPS. If it's above, you have a different one. And you just provide access rules. The only requirement is you can't take this money and buy a car. This money can only sit to give you healthcare, right? Whether that healthcare is through a fund, an insurance program, or self-fund, that's up to you. The law side, that we'll be clear on it, it has to be segregated and ring-fenced. So even if it's within the same scheme, you have to ring-fence it. We've talked about the advantages and also flexible contribution. People can put in money here and there. So how does it work? So the first point is your members will be paying cash, or yourself, you'll be putting cash in. And this cash will be ring-fenced away from your normal pension scheme. And then they accumulate, and then you access at retirement. Very simple. How do you access at retirement? You will not get a lump sum. You will now need to take, there are two ways. You can keep the cash in the scheme and be buying insurance every year, or you can have a specialized fund that just takes that cash and gives you the health care itself. So right now, the oldest PRMF in Kenya is by the military. It's called DEFMIS. They're in Nyayo House, 20th floor. You can go visit them. So they have a fund of 20B where all their guys, retired military people, go to hospital. They have a card. They go to a can, they have a card, they get treated, and then the scheme pays. The scheme pays about 1 billion shillings every year for healthcare, but remember, other members are contributing. So the fund actually is in a growth stage, right? So it works, and it has worked before, but I think private sector, we've not started doing it. So there has to be that issue of trustees. I don't know if you have trustees here, but you have to understand, you need an actuary like myself, where we have to design it for you. And you see those graphs? I have to do those graphs for you and say, how much will people invest? And I think this is PRMF is a very beautiful law. And it's beautiful because it means for 1,000 schemes, those are 1,000 clients for me as an actuary. So thank you very much, RBA. Yes, you need an actuary. Yes, thank you very much. No AI. This one you have to use me to do the math for you. Even if you do it with AI, I have to sign it off. So still, yeah. Yeah, even if you pay Anthropic $200, you still need to pay me. So that's an advantage. But what do is we literally just calculate what I've just done today and say how much you contribute. If you want is there like a IPMI cover you have? You guys have international, right? $1 million. So if you want the APA $1 million cover inpatient, then I'll say how much you contribute. If you want like the micro product, then these are how much you contribute. That's really the role of the actuary. And then those inflation, investment return plays, and then sensitivity analysis. And then if there's a sponsor guarantee, all those things, and then we provide. So as I said, the role of the actuary is to support on the contribution. There has to be clear rules of access. How do people access, variation, etc. I said there has to be a different investment strategy. And I really want to challenge the fund managers in the room today. Please, don't take money for healthcare and send it to bonds. I know we love it as fund managers. We get 10 billion. We open our laptops, we go to central bank, Dow CSD, we press a button, we invest 10B and go to sleep. I know, and then we charge 20 bips and like, okay, fantastic, yeah. Next flight, Maldives. I know we do that, but do we remember during COVID what happened? A lot of rich people died during COVID because all the airports were locked down, right? And there were only so much ICU beds. Do you remember that day? So people had cash to pay for ICU, but they couldn't access it and they died. that's what's going to happen to our market. If we don't take these assets, this money for PRMF, and build healthcare facilities, healthcare infrastructure, right, and still get the same 10% return, we will be financing inflation. But anyway, I know people for medical tourism will love it because there'll be Kenyans with money they can take to India. But there has to be that discussion about an investment strategy for these funds. So remember, the stakeholders are the employer. Please, as an employer, or you as a distributor, I know there are a lot of brokers in this room, you need to sell this story to your clients. If you have a client doing motor, medical, you tell them, look, why don't you create a scheme for your members? It doesn't hurt, and it's something to think about. As an employee, you have to really sell this concept of you need cash to fight inflation. And for the retiree, for them, you really have to find a way to support them to access healthcare in retirement. So finally, I know it's lunchtime, I have to run. Way forward. Oh yeah, but who's this guy? This guy look at himself. Huh? Yeah? Is that seashells? It looks like seashells, huh? Or, yeah? It looks, is a Lazo, they call them Lazio or something. So our commitment really to the sector is, one, raising awareness, and thank you, Eric, for allowing me to raise this awareness, because I know a lot of people look at PRMF like a good to have. It's not a good to have. It's a need to have. So we're really championing PRMF discussions. We guide you on design, right? Design and setup. And also supporting implementation. Remember, even though we help you design, the rules of a custodian, trustee, fund manager still apply. So it's not a one-man show. It takes a village. And also, it's important to keep members engaged in terms of, asking a member, okay, you have 10 million in the account, but how much can that 10 million buy you in a pension? And when does that money run out for you to buy for yourself, health insurance, right? I think it's that discussion about sustained member education to really drive the point of why we need this. So with that, I will close the discussion for questions. Thank you very much.
I think, Ezekiel, that was scary, exciting, and engaging at the same time. I think the thought of adding those 2 zeros is a reality check. And at 34% to be the reality in the country is frightening. And for me, it's kind of saying, what conversations are we not having? Which is a good segue to the question that's come up. It says, if you could get every employer in Kenya to do just one thing to improve retirement readiness, what would be the biggest impact? Or what would have the biggest impact? Is it a higher pension contribution, or PRMF option, or better financial education? Which of those 3 options do you believe?
Yeah, I think for me, I would want you to think about, if somebody is contributing 30K today, for every 1,000 shillings they contribute, they don't get a tax incentive, right? So you should also consider, where is the tax incentive? If somebody's contributing below 30K, maybe 10 per month, you can incentivize them to add more. But if they're contributing at 30, you can actually ask PRMF, because it adds another 15K, right? But if you don't do it as a PRMF contribution, then it gets taxed anyway. So I would recommend you to look at that aspect. That's number 1. Number 2 is, anybody below 25 in your organization, you need to hammer that contribution discussion. For people who are 45 and above, you need to tell them the reality. I know some of them are buying apartments. A lot of Kitengela is our informal RBA world, where people have bought buildings and they hope that they will retire from there. I can give you a story. There's a gentleman who had a bill of 10 million at Nairobi Hospital, and they came to us, Kenbright, can you give us, Nairobi Hospital likes you guys, give us an undertaking, so you tell Nairobi Hospital, you'll pay the bill, and I would have done it. But then they say, here's a building. I'm like, what am I going to do with this building, man? Right? No, this building is worth 50 million and just 10 million. Look, I'm not in the business of selling buildings, right? But the reality is a lot of informal sector people, that's how they save for their pension. They buy a building or they buy some assets that they assume they'll use, right? So it's working with them to provide liquidity on this side and support on that side. But the medical benefit, you have to communicate it different. The medical benefit is not that 100K. The medical benefit buys you catastrophic cover. Okay? It's not that you need the 100K. No, the 100K buys you 5 million shillings. It buys you 10 million shillings. It buys you 50 million shillings. That is the catastrophe purchase you're getting. So you have to communicate what protection that you're having. So I would say the impact would be what social protection, catastrophe supports you're getting for your members who are above 45. People who are below 40, I would say focus on tax incentives. Where would you put the money? Because they are more or less safe if you plan them well.
Thank you. And then there's one more question. If we had met 10 years ago, what would success look like for the Kenyan retirement industry today?
Sorry, Eva?
So if we had met 10 years ago and had a conversation, what would that look like today if you look at the Kenyan retirement space? I
would say less bonds. I think we're drunk with bonds. Government bonds, we are drunk with bonds. And you know, I just want to reiterate this point. On one hand, as Kenyans, we say, government, stop borrowing, please stop. And then we go to our money market funds, we go to our pension schemes and say, hey, do you know how much we send to government bonds? 1 trillion shillings, new money. Yeah. Pension alone sends 300B. New cash. Wow. Right? I'm telling you, and I want anybody to question me on this. If government says we are not issuing new bonds from tomorrow, some insurance companies, fund managers will collapse. Let's be honest. Let's be honest. Do you know deploying 10 billion shillings, I tell you, take 10B and go look for SMEs to buy. Do you need 5 years of analysis just to analyze SMEs or show me your P&L, show me. To deploy 10 billion shillings, it takes that. But for a bond, 2 seconds. Buy, go home, right? So hopefully we are seeing more diversification into the market, and I think that's an important point. And my hope is diversification to health infrastructure, hospitals, factories, training of doctors. We need that as a market. That's productivity, and I think that will take us forward. Thank you.